Jim, thank you very much. Well, the best part of it, I'm also the rector of George Mason University, so I'm chairman of the board there. We have the Scalia Law School there. We're one of the handful of universities in the country that represents all sides of the political spectrum, which is, I think, the way academia ought to be. Most important part of my resume is I left Congress undefeated and unindicted. And until when you talked about me being the first chairman of a subcommittee in 50 years, that was true, which sounds impressive until I remind everybody it was the DC subcommittee, which was the least sought after subcommittee assignment in the House of Representatives. But my first term, it worked for me because the city, as you remember, going back to 1995, lost its bond rating, it was going down the tubes. I authored the Control Board Act, authored the bill that got the Wharton Prison closed and 3,000 acres given to Fairfax County. But the best part about that committee is, as a freshman member of the House, it got me on the front page of the Washington Post above the centerfold 12 times my first year. Unfortunately, 8 of those pictures, I was standing right next to Marion Barry. But I had 4 standalones that I could send to my mom in California. So, look, I want to talk a little bit tonight just about politics. I want to put it in a national context. I want to take just a minute and go back to my first race at the age of 29 when I ran for the county board in Mason District. I was a young attorney here, growing up here in Northern Virginia. I'll never forget the county chairman at the time, Joe Reagan, saying, "Tom, if you want to win a seat on the board, you may have a career, but you'll never win it there. You need to move." I said, well, this is where I live, this is where I grew up, and this is where I'm running. And ended up running that year, got outspent. I had the whole political establishment against me. Ended up with 63% of the vote. Re-elected with 78% or 84%, and then I went on to knock the Democrat out for chairman of the board, bringing the only time we ever had a Republican board in the history on my coattails, and then to Congress 3 years later. But the lesson I learned in that first race, I had been chairman of the Conservative Union at Amherst College, where I went in Massachusetts. I'd been president of the Young Republicans at the University of Virginia Law School. And I started, my first brochure was a real hard anti-tax brochure about government taking too much. I started going door to door in Mason District, and I got it thrown back at me. And I found out Mason District was full of federal employees. There's a reason I've been voting Democrat. And I went back, and then I spent a few months ringing doors and just listened about what people were concerned about. They were concerned about education. They were concerned about the demographics in the district. They were concerned about traffic. They were concerned about commercial encroachment in their neighborhood. So I came back and I redid my brochure, and I talked about what the public wanted to hear about. And I listened and learned. I think so many times we talk to each other, we're an echo chamber. We in this room basically agree on 90% of the issues. But when we go out of this room, we're talking to a very, very diverse population out there that has a lot of needs. And sometimes we're selling something they're just not ready to buy. They're worried about other things. So the key to all you candidates is, before you open your mouth, do allow to listen. Talk about what the voters want to hear about. You don't have to park your principles at the door. I didn't do that. After my 3 years as chairman of the county board, it was the only time in county history the actual real estate tax bills went down. We were able to accomplish a lot together, working together, but we had to do it in a way that connected to voters. When I hit a doorbell, I'd always find, what's that point of connection? Where do they go to church? Where do they grow up? Where do they go to school? What's their favorite team? What's their dog's name? And I will never forget, after the '79 election, I'm in a 7-Eleven getting a Dr. Pepper and a moon pie, and this lady walks up to me and she says, "Oh, Mr. Davis," she said, "football died." And I'm thinking to myself, what is she talking about? Are they on strike again? What am I missing here? And she said, "Yes, my little dog, Football." She said, "You wrote a note at the end of the campaign thanking me for meeting me last April, and you put a PS on it, give Football a pat on the head for me. But our dog had just died." And we thought, you know what, we're Democrats, but anybody that cares enough about our dog to think about, that's the kind of person I want in office. There's a point of connection. Now, it sounds corny. Until she had a problem a year later, she didn't know who to call. She called our office. We took care of her. She helped her belief in government, and she was a lifetime supporter after that. So for candidates, find that point of connection. Find out what they're interested in. How can they connect to you? That's the key to winning elections, is connection. Don't rely on the party brand in this town. You've got to, you can sell yourself. I never ran away from the party. I was always put the party on my brochure. I never shied away from it. And I was running in a district that was carried by Democratic candidates as chairman of the House Republican Campaign Committee. So I never shied away from it. but I never forgot who sent me there and what their concerns were. This is a district, you gotta remember, Northern Virginia is different from a lot of areas. It is, like it or not, it's more secular than most of the rest of the state and most of the rest of the country. It's very multi-ethnic, and a lot of people here make their money off government. So when you want to talk about shrinking government, you need to be careful how you sound about it. You're not taking somebody's job away and the like. If you don't like that, then you should probably move somewhere else. If you don't like wheat farmers, you don't run in Kansas. And you've got to remember here that we're a government town, and that a lot of people make their living off that, and we need to understand that when we talk and try to connect to it. Now I want to talk to you about a few things that are going on nationally, because Fairfax is basically, we are a part of a national trend. We need to understand where we stand with the national realignments that are going on. Now I have this first quote, go back to the first quote. It's actually George Darwin didn't say that, or I wouldn't put it up here for the creationists. But it says, it's not the strongest species that survive, it's not the smartest of species that survive, it's a species that's best able to adapt to its environment. We're in Fairfax County, we've got to adapt, we've got to understand, we have to reach out, we have to talk to a burgeoning minority population that's growing up all around us and becoming politically engaged. So many of them agree with us on basic issues, particularly on cultural and social policy, but they push the mute button on because of the way we talk about other things. If we want to win in this county, we have to engage these people. We have to let out the welcome mat and bring them in. They are a growing and growing business force here. And as Rand Paul says, we evolve or we become extinct. Next slide. We live in a world with different bubbles. This slide I put together just to show we get our news one way, liberals get their news another way. We deal with different sets of facts. In fact, I like to say it started in 1986 when the Federal Communications Commission did away with the fairness doctrine, and talk radio sprang up, and then this was replicated with cable TV. And if you've ever watched Fox and MSNBC on the same night, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's different planets. And now people go get their news this way. And frankly, the crap to content ratio coming over the internet is exceptionally high. We all walk around in different bubbles, believing different things. It's important when we engage other people, we understand where they're coming from and try to talk their language. Not sacrificing our principles, but understanding that as a country we have grown apart because we listen to different media and get our news in different ways that confirm our world beliefs. Next slide. We're seeing this in Congress now. We used to have liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats, no more. The parties are what we say in political science, ideologically sorted parties at this point. The Republicans are the conservative party, Democrats are the liberal party. You don't like it, it's just the way it's been evolving this way, it's getting even more so. Next slide. I like this slide because it shows among Democrats, Kim Jong-un's approval rating is higher than Donald Trump. When you're talking to a Democratic door, don't try to sell Donald Trump. That's not going to work. On the other hand, Nancy Pelosi has a lower positive image than Putin does among Republicans. The leaders of each party are despots. So Democrats may not agree on much, except they don't like us. And we need to understand. But there's still a lot of independents out there. Next slide. Put the midterms into perspective. The reason in 36 of the last 39 midterm elections the president's party loses seats is, number one, you have what we call presidential-centric voters. A lot of Trump voters were Trump-centric, not as likely to show up in a midterm, but they'd come out for him. We saw this with Obama-centric voters. Both times he was on the ballot, he won. But the two off years he was off the ballots were two of the worst shellackings the Democrats have had in the century. Second issue is that the out party is generally more juiced. The out party tends to be more intense, and their turnout model tends to be higher. There is a reason that in the last 12 elections in Virginia, 11 of them for governor have elected a governor opposite the party of the president. And that is the party that is not in power tends to be more intense. We saw this the last gubernatorial election. We had a great candidate, but we saw the intensity of the Democrats on the ground in reaction to a Republican president. Those same intensities elected Bob McDonnell in 2009 by a wide margin after President Obama was elected. This is true throughout history. In addition to that, though, and finally, independent voters generally use midterm elections to put a check on the president rather than giving them a blank check. Independent voters are independent for a reason. They don't participate in the nomination process, they don't like either party, and they're stuck with the choices the parties give them. And so what they generally do is they tend to balance government, and they use these midterms So although the Republicans lost 40 seats in this last midterm election, that's just according to history. When you look at this in a historical perspective, that's natural. It doesn't mean a thing for the next election coming on, even though commentators would like to write that because that's the history they want you to believe. Next slide. In fact, the last 4 times now that one party has controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency, as you can see, the voters have punished the party in power every time they have flipped the House of Representatives. So what we saw in this last election, you can call it a reaction to Donald Trump or whatever, but it's history. It's the way the elections have operated for the last 100 years. Next slide. Now we talk about the Reagan coalition. Ronald Reagan got 60% of the vote in 1984. And that's a pretty wide margin. So if Ronald Reagan lost a county in this country in 1984, it was a pretty Democratic county, right? Well, look what happens with this last presidential election. The colored counties are counties that Ronald Reagan lost in 1980 and 84. Those counties split evenly between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. The old Reagan coalition is broken up. The parties have kind of realigned. I like to say the Republican Party has kind of migrated from the country club to the country. It's become a more rural party in many ways, more traditional party. I put it this way, if you live in a county with a Whole Foods, it probably voted for Hillary Clinton. If you live in a county with a Cracker Barrel, it probably voted for Donald Trump. Now, I said this to a group in Arlington, and this lady raises her hand. She said, well, I don't mean to correct you, Mr. Davis, but don't you mean Crate and Barrel? And I simply said, I rest my case. We live in bubbles. We live in bubbles. And sometimes we don't relate to the people around. We need to do more relation to the people around us. We've got a great story to tell, but you have to be able to connect and tell that story. Next slide. So prior to the 2016 election, when Jeb Bush announced that he's not going to get nominated, I was saying this, nothing against Jeb Bush, he's a fine man. I just say he's not going to get nominated because the Republican Party has indeed migrated. These green counties are counties across the country before 2012 that had moved from Bill Clinton in 1996. They had moved over to the Republican column in 2012 for Mitt Romney. These yellow counties, including Fairfax and Loudoun and Dallas, Texas, and San Diego, California, were moving the other directions. The parties were starting to shift geographically. This was prior to Donald Trump. Next slide. Trump added these additional red counties in the upper Midwest. These are counties that had had a more populous tradition. As we're talking about trade, his identification with them. You know, Trump ran a reality TV show. He was able to connect with these people, brought these additional counties, and look where they are, into the Republican column. All rural white counties. Now the blue counties, if you look at Orange County, California, you can look at the counties across the country, 3 suburban counties around Atlanta, Cobb, Gwinnett, and Henry counties around Atlanta, and the like. We're going in the other direction. So this movement that had started prior to 2012, Donald Trump put an exclamation point, and he accelerated its realignment. Next slide. So this is the change in the parties, basically, over the last 20 years, as you can see. Green counties moving to the Republican side, yellow counties moving to the Democratic side. Basically, the Democrats own urban America, Republicans own rural America, with 3 major exceptions. Majority minority counties, college towns, and what I call the granola belt. Aspen, Vale, Sun Valley, Idaho, Jackson Hole, where all the beautiful people hang out and try to live this rural rustic life. They tend to be Democratic, underlying basically the cultural alignments. Next slide. And this is, you've seen this before, this is the map. Hillary Clinton got more net votes, but with that $4.5 million vote lead in California, you take that away, Trump carries it nationally. Somebody said, what's your advice to Democrats? I said, I don't give Democrats advice. But if I did, I'd say they need a massive relocation program. They just overperform in certain areas. Next slide. These are America's super counties. We're seeing again the polarization. These red counties are counties that voted over 80% for Donald Trump. Some of these counties, by the way, were voting Democrat even in the 60s and early 70s. My favorite county here, it's not a red county here, but it's indicative, is Elliott County, Kentucky. Had never voted for a Republican in history ever until Donald Trump, and he got 78%. So we're seeing a realignment in a lot of these areas. Even in Fairfax, it's going the other direction. Next slide. Education is a new cultural divide, too, that we found out. As you look above here, here's the U.S. average of advanced degrees. You can see every state with a higher percent than the U.S. average in graduate degrees voted Democrat, which, by the way, confirms all our suspicions about what's the dangers of higher education. Under that, it went to Trump. But there is an educational divide. A lot of that goes to just the kind of the language and the connection that goes with the rhetoric of these races and the group speaking community. Next slide. I took this down to counties. Education in the counties with the highest percent of college degrees, Clinton carried 40 of the top 50 counties with college degrees. Next slide. Of the bottom 50 counties with the fewest percent of college degrees, Trump carried 43. Clinton carried 7, and the 7 that she carried were all either African American or Hispanic majority counties. Next slide. We're seeing more straight ticket voting than at any time in history. This is what we call parliamentary behavior in a balance of power struggle. People are going out and voting party. They're not splitting their tickets much. There are a lot of reasons for that, which I talk about in the book. But the bottom line is we're seeing these massive sweeps, Republican, Democrat. New Hampshire House went from 2-1 Republican to 2-1 Democrat in consecutive cycles because people are out and using party as a shorthand. A lot of this is determined by who decides to show up and how independents swing at this point. But it also, I think, emphasizes how we have to work as a team. That the votes that one Republican gets are more likely to go for other candidates, and we need to work in a concerted effort as a team to bring out our vote. I won my first vote in Mason District in an off year like this, where the average turnout, because Mason has a lot of apartments, was 33%, was the turnout in that off year. I moved that turnout in 1975 from 33% to 46%. And I brought out a lot of Republican lights, as we call them, energized them, and as they showed up to vote for me, they voted straight across the board, and we swept every Republican in the district, in a district where we lost every Republican 4 years before, except the sheriff candidate, where Jim Swenson, our sheriff, carried 51% in Mason, but only because his Democratic candidate had, I'm not lying, had 2 felony convictions and dishonorable discharge. He didn't have a part. Now, what are the Democrats doing at this point? Filibuster of nominees. The reason the Senate moved it from 30 hours to 2 hours, they're filibustering everything. The first year of Trump, Democrats in the Senate filibustered 79 nominees. That's more than we had in the previous 28 years. It's twice as many, more than twice as many as we had. So they are really dug in at this point. And we're in a society where bad behavior is getting rewarded. Next slide. But what the president has been able to do, as you can see from this, it may be too small, make these slides available to anybody, is you rule now by executive order and regulation in the courts. That's the new governance model because Congress is broken. You need 60 votes in the Senate. House was great when we controlled it, but it stalls in the Senate because Schumer wouldn't deliver the Democratic votes that's needed. That's why you have shutdowns and everything else. So Congress is broken. It's no longer an independent branch. The president's party becomes basically, if you will, an appendage of the executive branch, trying to protect their executive. The minority party no longer operates as a minority shareholder in government. They're now the opposition party, and they're just no to everything. That's what we call parliamentary behavior. But we're not a parliamentary system, we're a balanced power system, and it hasn't worked very well. Next slide. This just talks about presidential appointees, and you can see how long they're taking to confirm Trump nominees, longer than they've done anybody else before. This is with 50 votes, 127 nominees backed up because they couldn't get a hearing in the Senate, because it required 30 hours 4 times, even after you broke the filibuster. That's why Mitch McConnell moved the rules to 2 hours per nominee. We're over halfway into the president's term, and he's still got a quarter of the people he can't get in because he can't get it confirmed. Next slide. But he is still in the courts. So the good news for us is that they've given priority to these lifetime appointments, and the appeals courts are being filled, the federal district courts are being filled, and that is going to change the landscape, because when you get gridlock in Congress, who is the legislator of last resort, or first court, that moves to the courts? And that's where these battles are moved. Next slide. Now let's talk about Virginia. This is the Virginia map. As you see, Democrats get their vote in clusters. Tidewater, Northern Virginia, Richmond. Down here is Virginia Tech. It's college towns. You see Charlottesville and the areas around there as it's spread out. They have these bright blue clusters that just come out in droves as they drive and turn out in an election year. We may control 90% of the real estate, but they control the urban parts of the state. Next slide. This shows the excavatory map. It's hard to see this, but as you see these clusters in the urban areas, that's basically where Northern won his swing in the urban areas. In the rural areas, it actually got more Republican. But because we're outnumbered, we couldn't see that here. And in Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William County, Arlington, it's getting worse and worse. Donald Trump's percentage in Arlington County, 16% of the vote. 16%, 17% in Alexandria. We can't carry the state unless we don't need to carry these areas, but we need to be more competitive. That means not being afraid to put a Trump sign up in your yard, not being afraid to wear it, not being, basically, you don't have to sit there with the group speak where you're afraid to say something in a crowd. There is a lot of a herd mentality in politics. We see this all the time. We saw this with the Democrats with Ralph Northam, didn't we? We saw the stampede moving real quick, and now they backed off. And so there's a herd mentality to this. And we are basically the resistance to that. But it's up to us to be able to speak out. Next slide. So in college towns, this just shows Hillary Clinton outperformed Obama in these college towns. Charlottesville, Williamsburg, Radford, Harrisonburg. Harrisonburg had never voted for a Democrat for president since 1940 until Obama ran, and Obama gets 58% of the vote. Why? They're allowing students to vote now on these campuses. And as a result of that, they elected a student mayor that year because they changed their mayor's elections from May until November. And so we just need to understand they get their votes in clusters, and we're not spending time talking to them. Look, I've taught college at Mason since I left. These kids are gettable, but if you're not talking to them, if you're not showing up, if you're not part of the group speak, you're going to lose them in droves. And that is what has happened to us. Next slide. This just shows what happened in Northern Virginia. Obama's margin was 230,000, Hillary Clinton's 383,000. So this can't happen. We need to bring this back to more Clinton levels and we can carry the state because we're overperforming in the rural areas. We're doing far better there than we've ever done before. But we can't allow these kind of margins to exist. As you can see, statewide, Clinton did marginally better than Obama, but that Northern Virginia margin you couldn't overcome. We carried the rest of Virginia. Clinton did worse than the rest of Virginia outside Northern Virginia. She lost 62,000 votes vis-a-vis Obama, but she picked it up here. Next slide. These are just the top jurisdictions. Our top jurisdictions are Southwest Virginia. Their top jurisdictions are urban areas and college towns. Next slide. This is the governor's map. This I think puts it a little clearer. They just run these blue and red. This is by precinct. You can tell that these areas with density, they put people on the ground. They spent a ton of money on voter turnout. A ton of money. Going through every apartment development, every townhouse development, again and again and again, finding people, talking to them, getting their absentee ballot. Look at these absentee numbers. It's not just in Fairfax. Look at these California races. We lost 6 races on the absentee ballots. They have perfected this. We've got to get better at this and finding people and talking to them. We're just being outmanned. Next slide. This is Fairfax County. This is Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Again, in the far reaches of the county, we do the further you get from the city, the better we do on this. We can improve on this. But this is where the county looks. This is where it is. The darker the blue. That light blue in the middle there is my home precinct. We do reasonably well there. I'm sorry we lost it. We're going to carry it the next time. But by and large, and I'm in the 10th district now, because when they redistricted, Frank Wolf said, would you mind if we put you in the 10th? He says, Tom, we don't want you, but we want your neighborhood. So I get it. So, but this is kind of the map. As you move further out into more rural stretches, we tend to do better again. Next slide. This takes, again, urban. Richmond is the center one. You can see we carry 1 precinct in Richmond. Chesterfield, we carry more rural areas, but we're losing the areas closer to the city. And the same goes with Henrico County, which used to be a Republican bastion, and now we're losing by 20,000, 30,000 votes. Next slide. That's it. So anyway, I hope that gives you perspective of what we're up against. But I can tell you this is doable for us, and we just have to have a little faith. And so to give us that, I'm happy to have with me tonight somebody from the Trump campaign. He's come out of Georgia. He's a dynamite organizer. He's going to help organize this state and some others. But I want to introduce somebody that I'm very proud to have here tonight, Josh Finley, from the Trump campaign.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, great. So my name is Josh Finlay. I come from Georgia. I'm the regional director for the Trump campaign. I've got about 19 states that I'm working with. But as a new resident in Northern Virginia, I'm very happy to be here. This is special. It's great to follow Congressman Davis because he did a lot of the heavy lifting on a lot of what I wanted to talk to you about this evening. Talking about the great things the president's done. Specifically the regulations that he's rolled back, the judges that he's appointed, and the actions that he's been able to take. I want to talk to you for a second about the results of those actions. Because contrary to what you hear in the news, there are a lot of great things happening in the country. Right now, we have 1 million more jobs available than we have people to fill those jobs. African American, Spanish American, and Asian American unemployment is at an all-time low. We are set to be net energy exporters in this country by 2020. But you don't hear any of that stuff when you listen to the news, right? And here in Northern Virginia, this is a prosperous area. And it's hard to understand statistics sometimes, right? But I come from one of those Cracker Barrel counties in Georgia. And I want to tell you why President Trump is going to win this election. He's going to win this election because in 2007 and 2008, when the economy dropped, industry left Main Street America. When we could look around, the place that I grew up and I've lived my whole life, jobs were gone. And no matter how many times Barack Obama tried to tell us that the economy was back because the stock market was up, we looked around and our family members weren't working, our friends weren't working, there was no growth. I mean, literally in the county that I grew up in, people were fighting neighboring counties to try and get a plastic bucket manufacturer to come in. There was no hope, right? But the result of these things that the president has done, it's brought back faith in the economy, right? And so in that same county, that same Cracker Barrel county, where people were fighting over plastic bucket manufacturers, we've got animation studios coming in. We've got virtual reality studios coming in. It's amazing to see the investment. And for that to continue, we have to get this president elected. And just to assure you that it's happening all across the country. We're seeing and hearing stories about that every day. Now, how are we going to do that? That's the question, right? First thing I can tell you is that this is going to be the best organized, most well-funded political campaign in presidential history. We have already started this campaign earlier than any presidential campaign in history by an incumbent. And I was probably the 10th person to join the campaign. I was among the first group of hires that was not someone from 2016 or came over directly from the White House. And our office has exploded since I got there. We are implementing a historic field program with the RNC. For those of you that have done field work in the past, it used to be that you have an RNC state director and a Trump state director. And no one knew who was in charge some of the time. You didn't know which one you were supposed to talk to get your marching orders if you wanted something accomplished. We've streamlined all of that. Is better? Yeah. So we're going to have one Trump victory program going forward. And what that means for y'all is that we're going to have better resources and more resources available to you. We've got programs. So I'm working at a regional level. We're going to have someone on the ground here that's a state director, something that you know in the past. But we've also implemented what we're calling the GROW program. And what this is working through the state party. You're going to have the opportunity to come to the RNC, the Trump Victory Program, and say, look, we've got these school board candidates. They're great. We think they've got a chance to win. This might not be on your radar, but we've taken this step and this step and this step, and we think because of that, they've got a chance to win. What resources can you give us? And we're going to have that option available to you. Yay! We're trying to customize this in a way that we haven't in the past, right? We're trying to take an approach that's not strictly top-down. We want to know, because for every school board candidate that brings out a Republican vote, that's a vote that's going to count for the president, right? Yes. We're excited to be here. We're excited to be working with you through 2019, building that infrastructure into 2020. Thank you for your time, and look forward to working with you.